What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we will not botch our video like we did yesterday. that was an accident. That is completely my fault. But moving on to today's topic. So basically, I've been asked by a couple of people, what would be the top 10 right now in the early stages of Regulation D format? What is the best 10 options running around in the Regulation D format right now? So what we're gonna do is go through this list of what I think is the top 10 right now based on, you know, these online tours and results that have happened so far, based on, you know, how splashable are these options, how flexible they are, how well they do into the meta, of course, you know, hence the reason why they have good results. And then just overall give like general explanations as to why they're in the top 10, how you, the viewer, can use them on certain kinds of teams. So this way it can help with your team building once we get started with Regulation D officially in the coming days, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with our number one option. All right, coming in at number one is, of course, even in Regulation D, it is still this, and now in Regulation D, it still remains at the top right here. We got Flutter Mane, of course, without a doubt. I mean, as long as you still have, you know, these Paradox Pokemon running around, I feel like Flutter Mane is just going to be number one almost all the time, right? Until maybe the King Incineroar returns to VGC. But for now, Flutter Mane takes the top spot, of course. You know, Ghost Fairy, very, very good typing. You know, neutralizes the dark weakness a little bit. Excellent special attack, excellent special defense, excellent speed. You know, 135 is a very, very good stat. Of course, it makes use of the booster energy, right? Where you're able to just get another boost in the special attack department, especially if you go a modest nature. And then, you know, from there, you can even consider a speed nature, you know, with a timid nature as well. All right, but, you know, typical sets would be stuff like, you know, Moonblast, Shadow Ball, you know, Protect, and then maybe a coverage move, something like, you know, maybe just simply Dazzling Gleam for spread damage. You could do Thunderbolt, you know, to cover yourself against some of the bulky water types running around, like, you know, the Gyarados, the Iron Bundles, the Palafins, or the Urshifus now that are running around. The other flying types, the Genies not named Landorus, this is also relatively good against them. You also get access to Power Gem, great against, you know, something like Arcanine or other fire types in general. But again, with the fairy coverage, great into all the dark types, namely the Ruined Pokemon, great into Dragonite, of course, other types of dragons like Garchomp, you know, Roaring Moon. These are all things that don't want to be taken Moonblast, right? And then Shadow Ball is just great coverage, great stat move overall. Yeah, and then from here you can even just consider like choice specs, right? You know, just put on more pressure, more coverage moves on your Flutter Mane. Just really all depends on how you want to play it, you know, the type of style you want to play. I've also seen, you know, other people, and also myself, we go for Substitute Protect here with the booster energy. So this way, when we put it on, you know, these hyper offensive teams with stuff like Tornadus, Dragonite, you know, Urshifu, then we just have a way to answer the Trick Room teams, because then the turn that they go for the Trick Room, we can set up the Substitute, and then from here, you know, you can just round out your filler, you know, a typical team like this with Chien-Pao, and then something like either Amoongus or Rillaboom. And, you know, this is a very, very standard starting team for Regulation D. Very hyper offensive, very hard hitting. Flutter Mane, you know, will utilize the substitute here. If this is something like Heatran over here, then yeah, you know, one of these two can get the substitute, maybe even both. But yeah, this is always going to be the cream of the crop here with Flutter Mane at number one. So, you know, and you can also just combo it with like Chi-Yu, for example. So you could do like Chi-Yu over here, and then now the Flutter Mane Chi-Yu combination, along with Tornadus and, you know, other 3 filler slots, is going to do a lot of damage. You know, just overall a very, very oppressive special attacker. I don't really need to say so much about Flutter Mane. We've been used to this already for the last few months already, and without a doubt, it is still number one in Regulation D for now. Okay, let's move on. Next up on my list, we've got the Urshifu-Rapid Strike. Of course, this is one of the new options that we're getting from the Regulation D format, you know, from the Pokemon Home update. We've done a lot of team building, you know, on the channel so far throughout the month of June, and Urshifu was pretty much on every single team just because it's too good not to run, right? Because the fact that you can just crit, you know, with surging strikes, and then you can go through Protect with your other moves, okay, and then just deal so much damage, you know, based 130 attack. You can run Mystic Water on it, go an Adamant set, you know, because then you're just always almost partnering this thing with Tornadus, along with the support from Tailwind and Rain Dance. This is how you're able to outspeed, you know, a lot of the format, right? You can just go Adamant Nature like this with the Mystic Water, hit the second EV bump here with 156 attack investment, go to maybe about 140 where you can just outspeed Regieleki under the Tailwind, and then from there, you know, you can just pretty much just go, this is really all you need to survive Dragonite Chien-Pao Extreme Speed shenanigans, right? And then from here, this is just like pretty much extra bulk. You can go something like this and then just split up your bulk like this. This is totally fine. Okay, really just all depends on how you want to use the Urshifu, but this is like a sample with the Mystic Water set. You can also do like Focus Sash set, you know, where you can just go simply 252, 252, and then, you know, just rely on the fact that you have a Sash. So this way, you know, if they get you down to Sash, you can still go off with another, you know, attack. Great into the fire types, doesn't care about Intimidate, right? So Arcanine and Landorus, they're gonna suffer, okay? They don't really have too many tools for the Urshifu, unless the Landorus has a flying type move, right? But again, with the Urshifu having, you know, water coverage, you're just able to deal so much into the Landorus, forcing it to terrestrialize, right? And then you just get another cool combination with the Rillaboom, right? Where you can just put pressure on the opponent with fake out Surging Strikes, because you can't protect against the fake out, because then the Surging Strikes is just basically free damage, right? So, you know, there's no Dynamax, so, you know, Surging Strikes is just going to be doing so much damage. And like I said, the screens and Intimidate, they don't matter. Good fighting coverage, great against, you know, the Rune Pokemon, of course. Other Steel types, like a King Gambit, for example, or Terra Steel, Tinglu, for example. These are all like Pokemon that don't want to deal with Urshifu. Then you add the fact that you can add Rain Dance. Boosting Urshifu's damage in the rain is a very, very scary thought. And just the fact that this Pokemon also has a priority move with Aqua Jet. So now you also get combinations with Chien-Pao, which you'll often see on a lot of these teams. Like we just saw with the Flutter Mane, Chien-Pao, Urshifu is a very, very good combination. And everything hits harder now because you're dropping defenses. Now your Aqua Jet can actually do somewhat decent damage, right? You know, it along with the having priority. So it's just an overall very, very good mon. There's almost very little reason to not use Urshifu on your teams. You would have to have a very, very specific archetype or niche for another water type that, you know, to not consider running the Urshifu. All right, let's move on. All right, we'll do number 3 and number 4 together just because we've already been discussing both. But again, Tornadus and Chien-Pao are your number 3 and number 4 options. And again, they belong within the same archetype of this Tailwind Hyper Offense that's running around in Regulation D with, you know, the Flutter Mane and the Urshifu. And of course, in some cases also the Dragonite. But basically, with Tornadus, now you have, again, Tailwind and Rain Dance. But now you get access to what's called Bleakwind Storm in Regulation D, which again is a spread move. It's 100% accurate in the rain and not 100% accurate outside of the rain. So, you know, you already know what that means, right? So basically the idea is this, you know, it's another strong flying type attack that Tornadus can get, you know, and if you can get speed control by getting that drop, it can be very, very game changing for that matter, right? And then typically you want something like either Icy Wind for the mirror set, or if you want to deny certain Trick Room matchups, you can also go for Taunt. You can also taunt another Tornadus from going for their own Tailwind. So that's another tool that they have, but typically you'll also see stuff like Covert Cloak and Terra Ghost, just because again, Dragonite E-Speed with Chien-Pao is able to KO this thing, so you might go for the Terra Ghost option. And then what you can also do is just EV this Tornadus to survive the Dragonite E-Speed without the Chien-Pao, and it looks something like this, where you're just going for like a bulky Timid set, where you just have like enough speed to outspeed the base 100, stuff like Chi-Yu, Zapdos, you know, those kinds of Pokemon. So it's going to require a little bit of HP and defense investment, so I just like to go with something like this. This you'll see on a lot of my teams, right? This is already good enough to survive that interaction. It's also pretty good against the Urshifu Surging Strikes. But the whole idea is now with Rain Dance, you'll typically reduce fire damage against your own Chien-Pao. You'll also reduce damage, you know, just against your grass types in general. So let's say you had an Amoongus or a Rillaboom on your team, you might, they also benefit from the Rain Dance. And then again, the Urshifu also benefits from the Rain Dance because, you know, you're doing more damage in the rain because you are a water type. Okay, but then at the same time, you're making your other options not have to invest so much in speed and invest more into their bulk and into their attack stat. All right, so for example, you'll see FlutterMane on this, and FlutterMane, you don't really have to invest so much speed, right? You can just go maybe like right up to here, you know, which can just outspeed Garchomp, or you can just go up to this, you know, just to outspeed the genies, and then from here you can just do like, you know, just a very, very simple set where you're just meant to, you know, survive certain things that we've discussed in other videos. But this is a very typical set, and the whole idea again is because you have the Tailwind here, you don't need to go with Timid Nature here. You can you're able to invest in more of your options here. Typically, you'll also see like Tornadus paired with something like Regidrago, right? So this way you're able to enable, you know, the Dragon Energy stuff, and then just deal a bunch of damage. I've also seen shenanigans with the Hisuian type Flosion, where people are also trying to go for the Eruption stuff. That's running around. So typically, you know, this is also still relatively fine, depending on how you want to use the Tornadus. But basically, it is the centerpiece of these hyper offensive teams, and we already showed what a typical squad looks like when we were talking about FlutterMane. But you might also see stuff like double genies with like Landorus and Tornadus, because now another flying type where you can click Tailwind, and Landorus isn't the fastest of the genies, right? But now, of course, because you have a little bit more speed, you're able to just go for Earthquake, have a faster Earthquake, and then you're able to Earthquake next to the Tornadus because, you know, you are a flying type, and then something like this where Chien-Pao, you're just doing a little bit more damage, right? But this is also something that you can consider using. I've also seen some stuff with Tornadus Zapdos, right? Because now with Zapdos and having Hurricane, you know, it's not great to have Hurricane miss, right? So now you get access to Rain Dance and Tailwind, and now the Zapdos doesn't really have to worry about speed so much. Just be bulky with something like a Rocky Helmet, and then Static, and then from there you just have accurate flying type moves, right? And at the same time just be bulky overall, right? So you might even just do something like this. But I've also seen some Tailwind modes to something like with Trick Room with the Cresselia stuff. So, you know, we'll talk about Cresselia in a second because it's also in our top 10, but more on that in a little bit. But yeah, Tornadus and Chien-Pao will of course take this slot, I believe, within the third and the fourth one. But now moving on to Chien-Pao over here. Yeah, I just had it and then I took it away. But yeah, moving on to something like this, again with the Chien-Pao, you know, with Ice Spinner, again, just this hyper offensive mode where you're just dealing so much damage, and you have already a priority move that it just really doesn't all that matter whether, you know, teams have Trick Room or not. The Ice Spinner is just able to, you know, remove terrain. So it's things like Rillaboom and Indeedee, you know, they suffer at the hands of Chien-Pao because you're removing, you know, probably their best weapon is the terrain that they are able to set. Again, the ice coverage is really good into basically all the genies, like an opposing Tornadus and opposing Landorus, even the Thunderous, which is not used as much as these two, but you know, it's still very, very good. Combos well with Dragonite, you know, and it just enables the Dragonite to do so much damage, you know, with the Choice Band Extreme Speed shenanigans. You're just able to pick up so many different KOs and make people rage on Twitter because they can't stop it, right? Or they don't have the tools on their team for this combination, right? So then from there, of course, Sacred Sword, really, really good against other dark types. And again, with the fact that you can drop these defenses and go for, you know, a strong Sacred Sword with a base 120 attack stat is very, very good. And then at the same time, it's good against other steel types that, you know, Dragonite doesn't have the tools to deal with. Technically, it does get Stomping Tantrum, of course. But yeah, I feel like, you know, Chien-Pao will be around, you know, just like it was around in Regulation C. It's very, very strong. And now it's even stronger in Regulation D just because, again, you have access to now Urshifu along with Dragonite. And like I said, we did a whole video on this core. This is basically the hyper offensive core that we're looking at here. So, you know, Chien-Pao is a mainstay here, so nothing else really needs to be said. You could do most times if you have this for, you know, if Chien-Pao's getting the Sash and the Urshifu is getting the Mystic Water. Sometimes you might even just go like a Choice Scarf set, you know, where you're just able to go for a faster Surging Strikes, or, you know, pivot out with U-turn if it's not a very, very favorable position. You have that option as well. But the whole idea is now with Chien-Pao and some priority physical hitter, you know, even something like Scizor has a spot, you know, on teams like this, it does relatively well. But yeah, it's now sometimes also you might even see some Chien-Paos forgo the Sacred Sword and just go for Ice Shard. You know, priority Ice move is very, very strong, right? Especially against like all these Genies, all these Landoruses running around. Priority Ice Shard, where Landorus is 4 times weak to it, is very, very good. Even Ice Spinner against something like an Ursaluna, you know, and typically they may or may not be able to Terra, so you're able to just deal a bunch of damage into that thing. So, you know, ice coverage is very, very good always in VGC. So yeah, Chien-Pao and Tornadus. Coming in at number 5, we're going to look at Landorus. So this is the other Genie besides Tornadus. And Landorus, again, another one of the new options. Ground Flying is excellent typing, of course, because, you know, flying types being weak to electric type attacks. But then you have the ground typing to make yourself immune to them. So stuff like Regieleki just gets pretty much walled, right? Unless it has Terra Blast, Terra Ice, but even then, right, Landorus looks really, really good against Aleki, looks really good against Iron Hands, right? And then you look at stuff like Heatran, again, with Heatran being 4 times weak to the Landorus, another thing that suffers. So look at all these Pokemon here that, you know, just kind of suffers at the hand of Landorus. And then also Ursaluna, right? You know, with Ursaluna also being like a ground type, you can just intimidate the Ursaluna, and then, you know, it can't really use its headlong rush against you. You know, because you're a flying type, it would be forced to use Facade, but then at -1, you know, how much damage is it really doing? It's doing a good chunk, but, you know, Landorus, you know, being an Intimidator, really, really good against a lot of these physical options, right? So then from there, you know, you're also very good against the Steel types, and then good against Chi, good against also, like, technically FlutterMane a little bit, but by the way, it also pairs really well with FlutterMane, right? Just because of how much synergy they have, you know, with FlutterMane being weak to Steels and Landorus being really, really good against Steels, right? So there's some good synergy there. And then just like, if you look at its attacks at 145, very, very good. And then the speed, 91, which already makes it faster than all the other base speed 90s, like for example, Galarian Moltres. So you already outspeed the Moltres just from the get-go, which is also very, very good. But Landorus, again, you know, with an Assault Vest set, let me just take away the Moltres. Like, you know, Earthquake, you don't even have to run necessarily Earthquake. Stomping Tantrum, really good. U-Turn as a pivot option is really, really nice. Then Terra Blast, Terra Flying, you know, for example, just to give yourself a flying type attack, and then something like Rock Slide over here, right? Or even Rock Tomb for speed control. That's also been a thing. You know what? I'll actually put Rock Tomb here. So, like, you're bulky, you know, in the sense that you're, you know, getting off an Intimidate, so you're reducing physical attack damage, and then at the same time, you have an Assault Vest. So now you're taking less damage from special attacks, right? So Landorus becomes a very, very bulky pivot that you can, you know, pivot in and out, cycle your Intimidates, right? The Assault Vest set. I've also seen, like, you know, of course, the Choice Scarf sets, you know, where you're just able to outspeed a lot of different things, and then just, you know, go for fast Earthquakes, for example, or, you know, faster Rock Tombs, faster Stomping Tantrums, you know, that sort of thing. Now, the main thing you have to understand is you got to watch out for Urshifu, right? You know, because of the Surging Strikes. So this is why some Landorus opt to go for like Terra Grass, you know, as an example, or just something to be able to resist the Urshifu. Even like Terra Water is also really, really nice against that kind of thing. But yeah, Landorus also has pretty good synergy, you know, again with the Genies, because you're able to Earthquake next to him. Also really good, you know, with Amoongus, in the sense that, you know, you could also run like a Clear Amulet set with Swords Dance, right? And then Protect over here, you know, as an example, right? And then this could be like Terra Blast, you know, whatever, or just some filler move here. But the idea is, like, you know, with Amoongus being able to, you know, provide redirection support, the Landorus, you know, can potentially set up a Swords Dance, and then, you know, just potentially click Earthquake or Stomping Tantrum, whatever move it wants. But, you know, this is another combination that you can definitely run with Landorus. Also has pretty good synergy with Cresselia, of course, you know, another one of the newer options, you know, because again, with Landorus, you're able to just weaken Cresselia's physical nemesis, right? Right, and then at the same time, you know, you're able to just pivot with a U-turn, okay, and then cycle into a Trick Room Sweeper, and then Cresselia can just go for Trick Room, and then, you know, you're set, right? So really, really good, and just really just depends on how you want to play the Landorus. So if you want to put it as a setup, you want to make it a bulky pivot, you want to use a Choice Scarf variant, but all in all, it's a very, very versatile Pokemon, very splashable on a lot of different teams. You can put it on a Trick Room team with Cresselia, like I said. You can put it on Hyper Offense with the Tornadus stuff. Really, really nice in terms of what it can provide your team. So yeah, definitely within the top 10 for sure. Next up is the Amoongus. We just very briefly talked about this, when we were talking about Landorus, but Amoongus gives your team an option to be able to play in Trick Room. It's always going to be relevant in VGC, whether there's Dynamax or not. It's just too good of a Pokemon sometimes to be left off on teams. Sometimes you may even just leave this off for Rillaboom, just because Rillaboom is a fundamentally different Pokemon, but it is a stronger grass type option in terms of what it can do. But Amoongus is one of the best support Pokemons in the game. You get redirection support with Rage Powder. You get Spore Pressure, 100% Sleep Status, which is why some teams even go for Terra Grass in the first place, or even like Safety Goggles, so this way they can ignore the Amoongus in that sense. Then you're also a Cleric on the team because you can heal your ally for about 50% of that max health. And then of course you have the just Protect over here, or even like Clear Smog during the Dondozo days, where you're just able to remove stat buffs, right? And then Regenerator, you can just pivot it in and out and just get your health back. Rocky Helmet is a very, very good item at the moment, just because you can break sashes off of those Urshifus, off of those Chien-Paos, and it's really good against Urshifu, right? Because Surging Strikes is 3 hits, and then that means they're taking 3 chips from the Rocky Helmet damage, right? So they're just eventually gonna KO themselves unless they have some answer like Safety Goggles or like Protective Pads or that kind of thing, right? Of course, it can be played either in Trick Room teams or hyper offensive teams, right? So imagine something like this with Tornadus, Dragonite, Flutter Mane, and Urshifu-Rapid Strike. And then over here you have like something like Heatran over here, right? So you have a Dragon, Fairy, Steel, Fire, Water, Grass core. Basically, this is your hyper offensive stuff. And then the Amoongus just gives, stability and balance for all of these hard hitters. Where you can just redirect stuff, put things to sleep. If they want to click Trick Room, sweet, bring in the Amoongus and start clicking, spores on things that don't want to be taking spores. Stall out the Trick Room teams that way. So you might see Amoongus on, these hyper offensive teams, but you may also see it, with stuff like this with Landorus as well. Like we just said, Landorus, Moltres, okay. Like Landorus, Moltres combinations are also really, really good. This is also like a Sword and Shield kind of thing, where like, again, you can just provide redirection support, for the Tailwind and Nasty Plot stuff from the Moltres. You have that option. Then you can even find it on like Cresselia teams, right? Just for like Trick Room setup, Trick Room Abuser. Sometimes you might even just have like Indeedee Hatterene teams that also want to utilize the Amoongus in that sense. Indeedee Hatterene, Torkoal, right? And then just one more option over here, like Torkoal, Iron Hands, right? Iron Hands. This is another core, right? And then if you want to go for like a little bit more balance, like you can still keep the Iron Hands Amoongus, but then you just add Cresselia and then the Landorus, right? And then this is also part of your core, right? So then you have like 2 other splashable options, right? Depending on what you want to do with the rest of the team. But like, again, Amoongus, providing that redirection support with your Intimidator and your Fake Out Mon, it's one of the best options that you have. Even if they click Trick Room, again, you have pressure just because you have priority sport. All right, let's keep going. Next up is the Cresselia, like we were just mentioning. So Cresselia this time around gets a really, really cool move called Lunar Blessing, which also makes you like a Cleric. You're able to heal yourself and your ally, and you get your status cured, right? So imagine, getting parried or getting slept or potentially getting burned, for example. You can click Lunar Blessing and take care of that status condition. So it's a really, really good Pokemon in that sense. And then, of course, you look at its bulk stats. HP 120, Defense 110, Special Defense 120, right? This is actually a nerf, right? It used to be a lot bulkier than this, but they nerfed it this time around. But again, your primary job is to be a Trick Room setter. And then at the same time, you consider just like one move here, maybe like Moonblast, for example, with Terra type Terra Fairy. So this way you're able to resist the dark type coverage against you. Stuff like Chi-Yu, Dark Pulse, or Moltres, or Urshifu Single Strike. Terra Fairy, Moonblast is a way around it. Then from here you get another support move. You could do like the infamous Ally Switch. You could do Calm Mind, where you can just sit in front of the opponent and say, you can't break me, and I'm just going to go to +6, and then just keep going for Moonblast. You could do that. You could do also like Helping Hand, where maybe you're partnered next to Landorus, for example, and then the Helping Hand Earthquake plays are an option. But Cresselia also is really, really good in terms of like giving speed control in the other sense, right? You can also do like Icy Wind instead of also just Trick Room, right? I've seen this a little bit. So Icy Wind will get you know, -1 stages. Then again, like we said, Amoongus and Iron Hands, this is the core that we've been using. And then you can just slap on like 2 other offensive options that can put pressure besides, you know, Cresselia and Amoongus, right? But you can also do like, of course, the patented Ursaluna, you know, archetype with the Cresselia. This is what like makes Ursaluna like relatively good. You know, not necessarily like it itself, it's a pretty good Pokemon, but like Cresselia just gives it a little bit better synergy, right? Because again, you can Earthquake next to your Cresselia, and at the same time, you can just keep healing your Ursaluna over and over again, because again, with the Flame Orb Gut stuff, you're taking chip damage every single turn, and eventually you're gonna start to get low on health. So the fact that you can go for Lunar Blessing and get this thing back to full health is a really, really nice, you know, complement to it, right? And then at the same time, you know, you can slap this onto like hyper offensive teams and also like bulky balance teams, right? So for example, like you could do Grimmsnarl teams, you know, with for example Hisui and Goodra, right? I've seen this a little bit, you know, just like set up screens. Yeah, I'll take away the Ursaluna for a second. Set up screens, make the Goodra bulky. Cresselia is also relatively bulky, and then just support the Goodra in general, right? I've seen teams like this, and then at the same time, you could also like add in the typical chalk core with like Heatran, right? I'll take away the Grim for a second, right? I gotta talk about chalk, you know, before we move on to other things, right? The Amoongus, the Landorus, like we said, okay, and of course the K was like the Kangaskhan, right? But you still have like this core, which is relatively strong, and then from here you can just add whatever options, right? You could just add like Urshifu, and then like a Moltres, for example, right? And then that could be like a relatively solid core, right? So Cresselia, really, really good Pokemon this time around. It's going to be on a lot of different teams. You just need an answer and a way to break it, okay? Sometimes you'll see stuff like Mental Herb, right, where they just don't want to get taunted. They want to ensure that they get the Trick Room up. You'll sometimes see Safety Goggles, because if they click Trick Room, now the opposing Amoongus is faster, so then they'll try to Spore you. So this is one way to alleviate that in that sense, right? So it's a relatively bulky Pokemon, has a lot of different sets that it can run. It also has like another move here. What was it called? Skill Swap. Yep, that was it. So no, that's Shadow Ball. So Skill Swap is another move that it gets, right, where you can just like trade abilities. So this way you can, you know, screw the other Ursaluna by just taking away Guts, and then it's just burn over time. So you can also Skill Swap Intimidate, which is actually kind of funny. So yeah, it just really depends on what you want to do with the Cresselia, but primarily it's a bulky Trick Room setter that's hard to break. It's on balance teams, it's on Trick Room teams, it's also on hyper offensive teams, Grimmsnarl teams with Goodra. You know, it's just a relatively strong Pokemon all around. Alright, this one towards the tail end of our video. How about a little bit of Regulation C love with Iron Hands? Still a very, very strong Pokemon in Regulation D. In fact, it's actually I would say one of the best, and this is why I'm putting it in the top 10. Fake Out Pressure, right? So again, allows you to set up potential Trick Room or Tailwind turns, right? So imagine if you had Cresselia here, or if you had like a Tornadus, and you want to be able to set up your Tailwind or Trick Room and make sure that your setters don't get doubled up. You know, Iron Hands, but Fake Out does relatively well. And then even when you click Trick Room on this, right, now your Iron Hands can also be technically a Trick Room sweeper in that sense, right? Drain Punch, again, fighting coverage, really good against like all the Rune type Pokemon coming out. Great against Iron Bundle. You know, so is this move, Wild Charge. Also really good against other genies not named Landorus. You know, good against the water Urshifu. Good against like Moltres, for example. And then, you know, a little bit of neutral hits into Dragonite. You know, so this way it has a little bit of a harder time to remove it. And then, although you are weak to FlutterMane, you'll usually have this move, Heavy Slam, and along with the Assault Vest, where you're just able to take a big hit, you know, and just to show you like a sample EV spread, we'll go to the second bump here. We'll optimize for the Sand Chip damage, so 239, actually for like Ball Charge stuff, right? And then a little bit of speed, and then pretty much just almost all special defense. Yeah, let's put like 20 speed, right? This is a very, very standard Iron Hands Assault Vest set. And then, you know, technically, it can also be put on hyper offensive teams. Doesn't even have to be on Trick Room teams. You could do something like this, where like you have the Tornadus, you have Flutter Mane over here, then you have, of course, like Dragonite and Urshifu. Oops. Dragonite, yep, there we go. Ursh, and then probably something else to like round out this slot here. I don't know, maybe like Chien-Pao, for example. And then you can have like substitute on the Flutter Mane for the Trick Room shenanigans, right? So you get Fake Out Pressure here just to be able to help you set up these Trick Rooms. You also can have Fake Out and help set up the substitute for that matter, right? It really just depends on how you want to play this. But this is another very standard hyper offensive team. You can also play it the slow way, where you can put this on the Trick Room teams again, like we mentioned, with Cresselia, Landorus, and Amoongus. It's also good there. But it's a very bulky Pokemon in this sense, right? And you just need options to be able to deal with it. Otherwise, it could just potentially sweep you, right? I've also seen stuff like this, back in Regulation C with like safety goggles and then Swords Dance sets, where usually that's more on like the Indeedee teams. So it's like Swords Dance Protect, for example. Like I've seen this on like Indeedee, Heatran teams, right? Along with, Torkoal, right? This is a very, very common four. And then in the back, you'll have something like maybe Glacier or Ursaluna, right? Let's just put Glacier just for the sake of it. And then something like this, maybe the Lilligant, right? Hisui and Lilligant. So like you have Lily-Cold combinations. And then this is a very, very standard Trick Room core, right? Almost like hard Trick Room with like a fast mode with the Lilligant. And again, this is like a Swords Dance, Iron Hands, in that sense, right? So, the Psychic Terrain just helps it set up. You can't fake out. And then from there, just set up Trick Room, and then Iron Hands becomes a good sweeper there, right? So it can be used as a stabilizer. It can be used as a, Trick Room sweeper. It can be used on hyper offensive teams for a little bit more bulky support. And then it's also very splashable on a lot of different teams depending on how you want to use it, right? So this is why, again, we put this up in the top 10. Okay, how about everyone's favorite derpy dragon earning a top 10 slot over here with Dragonite? So again, with Dragonite, of course, you have to mention, Chien-Pao anytime you want to talk about Dragonite, along with Urshifu over here. Again, a pairing that we've discussed multiple times, but it's just too good, right? Again, with priority, extreme speed, choice band, Terra normal, pressure, you have to be forced almost to like go Terra Ghost. But Dragonite, a very, very strong Pokemon. Now that Chien-Pao is running around here, it's always been that way, right? Even before, Regulation D, Regulation C also featured Dragonite Chien-Pao teams. You get a lot of different coverage moves, right? You can also go for like Stomping Tantrum if you need the ground coverage against things that want to be taking ground hits, like maybe a Heatran doesn't want to be taking a ground hit, Iron Hands, the bulky steel types like King Gambit. Then you could just do stuff like Low Kick and Outrage. Outrage being a very, very good move. And it's a dragon type attack that, even though it may confuse you and it may be like a random target besides your own, it still does a heck of a lot of damage. So Outrage, again, still like very, very strong in that sense. You also can do like Aqua Jet along with Aerial Ace. So this way you still get a flying coverage here. And then this is also pretty good like with those Tornadus Rain Dance teams, right? You'll see like Aqua Jet as well over there. Sometimes maybe even not, just because Urshifu always has it anyway. So you may opt for another type of idea with the Dragonite. But it also gets Iron Head for sure. Like again, steel coverage against Flutter Mane and other fairy types is also very much appreciated. You can also opt for something like an Assault Vest just to make your Dragonite even a little bit more bulkier, right? Able to take those Chi-Yu Flutter Mane hits. And then speaking of that pressure, you can also just go multi-scale here, where at full HP you can take one big attack because the damage is going to be halved. So you're still prone to intimidate and fake out, but the bulk that you would get with the multi-scale is very, very good. Having said that, Inner Focus again, also very, very good move. I think it's much better now than it was in Regulation C, just because there's a lot more Landorus. So you want to be able to not get intimidated by Landorus. And the same thing with the fake out stuff. It's also not super great to get that either. I feel like both abilities are very good. Just all depends on how you want to play the Dragonite, right? But very, very typical teams. Of course, again, you have this. We already showed them already. Like here, just slap on a Flutter Mane and a Heatran and or Amoongus, right? And then just one of these run like substitute protect stuff. But like again, like the very, very standard hyper offensive team that you'll see throughout Regulation D. This is it right here. You'll see some variants, maybe not even like all 4 or all 5 of these, maybe just like 3 of these, and then from there you go like a different route. But like Dragonite is just meant to be played on those Tailwind hyper offensive teams. It does so much damage, right? And then even you can also run like the lesser popular Lumberry, Tailwind sets, right? You can even do that. If you don't have Tornadus on your team. This is more of a Regulation C kind of thing. I don't think people are going to be using this in Regulation D. I feel like more people are just going with like the Choice Band and or the Assault Vest variants in this sense. So, it really just depends. But like, I feel like this is the best way to utilize Dragonite right now at this given moment. That being said, it does get access to Dragon Dance, right? So if you already have a Tailwind setter, and you already have like some kind of Amoongus to help redirect. The Dragonite can also set up with a Dragon Dance. That's also very, very convenient. So it really just depends on what you want to use the Dragonite for. But again, very, very strong Pokemon with Chien-Pao and Urshifu. Puts on a lot of pressure. The only way to really stop it is to, take out the Chien-Pao first and then break the multi-scale on the Dragonite. And then from there, maybe have like a FlutterMane in the back to pressure the Dragonite. But again, a very, very good Pokemon to use and start with. Okay, to end things off here, I'm a little bit torn between these two, right? So I feel like this one gets the 10th slot and then this one gets like the honorable mention 11th slot, right? So it's a bit of a toss-up between the Ursaluna and Heatran, so I'm putting both on the screen here. Of course, Heatran, very much a strong part of that Fire Water Grass core with Urshifu and Rillaboom. Again, with these guys, you have a very, very good starting point to a team, and then the other three could be like some other archetype that you want to try and run. But overall, they support each other relatively well, with Heatran being a Fire Steel type, able to do very, very well against those Chi-Yu-FlutterMane teams, just because, again, you can't click these fire moves against your Rillaboom and or in general, right? Just because, again, with Flash Fire, you're able to just absorb that and get a +1 boost. And then Terra Grass is another thing that people are trying, again, just because you have that fire typing, you're weak to water attacks. So then you just click Terra Grass, you're able to absorb those relatively comfortably right in front of an Urshifu. And then if you already have like Terra Grass on your team, then you're kind of done. Okay. This is also like typically done with the leftover set. If you do have a substitute set, substitute Heatran is really good into the Trick Room games, because it's just hard to break, right? Like, look at your bulk, 91 HP, it's okay, right? Above average, 106 defense and 106 special defense. Very, very bulky Pokemon. Then all of a sudden, now you're adding substitute to this, and it just becomes hard to break over time. And the Trick Room teams get stalled out relatively well, as long as, you're using your Heatran correctly in that sense. But at the same time, again, you're a strong special attacker. 130 special attack is very, very strong. You could also do like a Life Orb set and just make it a sweeper under Tailwind, like with those Tornadus teams. So you can go for like Heat Wave, Flash Cannon, your Steel Coverage, and then Earth Power. And then Protect, this is like a very standard Sword and Shield set, right? Imagine Dynamax, again, getting a defense and a special defense boost, from Max Quake or Max Steel Spike. It was a good Pokemon then. But even now, so like something like this where you can just go like a Timid set, just have enough speed, for the Alecki stuff. And then from there, just have a little bit of HP just to optimize your Life Orb chip. Pretty much almost max HP, max special attack, just rounding out the bulk defenses. Something like this is a very standard fast Heatran, with the Life Orb. But again, Earth Power, really good against Regieleki, really good against other Heatrans, right, that don't even want to be taking Earth Power, hence the Grass type, where again, you're able to resist those ground type attacks in general. Rillaboom is a great complement here, just because grassy terrain makes earthquake damage weaker, right, in that sense. So, go figure. And then again, with this strong Fire Water Grass core, Heatran does relatively well. You gotta also mention about the Chalk core, with Heatran, Cresselia, Amoongus, and Landorus. This is a very, very standard core in terms of what you're trying to do here. You could even just slap on like a Galarian Moltres, for example, and then one other stuff, like what is it, FlutterMane. I think this is another good one over here, that just to add a ghost type, a strong special attacker besides Moltres. Maybe even take out the Moltres and put in something else, maybe something like Glastrier or Ursaluna. But anyway, I digress. But Chalk core again was something that it was even before like our era, or which is right now. So like again with Cresselia, just able to, if you all even consider like ally switch, right, the ground type attacks just get whiffed. Cresselia can heal the Heatran over time. These two have been, this core in general is just like very, very strong. Again, you also have like a flying type pivot, where if you think a ground type attack is coming in, you could go into your own Landorus, or even go into your own Cresselia for that matter. The Amoongus can redirect all of those Urshifu attacks away. It's a very, very solid starting four, which is why I like Heatran in general. Again, just like, also like Flash Cannon is also really good into the fairy type. So like, it's not going to kill the FlutterMane, but what can the FlutterMane really do to you besides like Shadow Ball stuff, right? So that's my 2 cents there. Then, like I said, the other slot could have even gone to like Ursaluna. Like this is the mon that got a lot of hype, even before the format even began. But It's finding itself in like somewhat of a interesting positions where like even though it does have Trick Room up, it can't really utilize it so much or as well as one would like necessarily, because you know the opponents are able to play around it for that matter. Like the fact that you have to like use a turn to protect and activate the Flame Orb gut stuff means the Cresselia is going to get double tapped every single time, right? And then you don't have the speed control. They have an Urshifu in front of you. You can't break the Urshifu because again you're just going to be taking surging strikes. But again, I digress. Still, it's a very, very strong Pokemon. Base 140 attack, 130 HP, 105 defense. Think of like Iron Hands and Great Tusk in that sense, right? It's another Pokemon with triple digits in HP attack and defense. A little pretty decent special defense, I would say, right? So you can run the Flame Orb set with like again with like what's that move? What's that ground move called? I just can't remember at the moment. Yeah, there it is. Headlong Rush, of course, Facade. Then over here you could do something like Crunch if you want. Like Dark Coverage is really good. It also gets access to the element punches. Right, you could do like Ice Punch, right? If you want to hit the Genies and Landers for super effective damage, you could do Fire Punch. Hit those grass types. Then you can even do Thunder Punch. Even at the same time, just hit those water types that look really, really good against you. Again, like the Urshifu for that matter. You don't even have to run like Guts, right? You don't even have to run Flame Orb. You could still run like some kind of berry and then do like Belly Drum stuff, right? I've seen this from a couple different teams, right? And just get like a little recovery berry. It doesn't even have to be like citrus berry, but you could just do here. I'll just put the berry just for the sake of it. You could do something like this, right? And then all of a sudden the Ursaluna can just be relatively bulky. You don't even need that much attack anyway, right? You can just invest in all your bulk. But the idea that you want to make sure in terms of your EVs, just optimize your Flame Orb if you're gonna do it, right? So if you do run the Flame Orb, you can use some of the older sets that we had on the channel. Just go to about 140, which is this, right? This will optimize the Flame Orb. Then you could do something like this, where you have this much attack, right? And then just need about 132. This will help against the Urshifu-Rapid Strike. This is a common set, or you can drop it a little bit, or even like go just about 76 and then just go about 140 here. Right, and a little bit of speed. This will also help you against the Iron Bundle Hydro Pump. Really just all depends on the kind of set and spread you want to run. But the point is, it's that it's a very, very strong Pokemon in Trick Room. It's a Trick Room sweeper. It falls in the base 50 category. So stuff like Azumarill, King Gambit, Iron Hands, these are all Pokemon within that speed tier. So a little bit of speed doesn't help. You can outspeed them outside of the Trick Room. Grass Terra is also pretty decent, right? So this way, Amoongus is not annoying, or just like the Urshifu-Rapid Strike is not annoying. Terra Normal is also another one, just to get a little bit more facade damage. Really all depends on how you want to play it, but like, it's just a very, very strong Pokemon that has like a little bit struggle, but overall it's just like a very, very, offensive threat that you have to respect anytime you see it in Team Preview. And it's a cool Pokemon. I like it a lot. Don't use the Ursa Ring EVI. I've had a couple people suggest that. I don't think you need to do that. Right? It just that's not a thing. Okay, I feel like that's better as like a single set. But you don't even have to put this on like Trick Room teams, right? I've seen this just on like balanced teams, just so that they have something in the back just to play in the Trick Room. So you might see stuff like this where like you have a Zapdos here with Grimmsnarl. Okay, then you have the Rillaboom, the Urshifu, as like a core. Then you have the Ursaluna over here, and then Heatran is like your fire type, for example. You might have something like this, and then Ursaluna does relatively well, right? Again, you can Earthquake and go for discharge plays for that matter. It just really all depends on how you want to use it. But again, good Trick Room sweeper, pretty good in the balanced teams. You can also slap it on in some of those hyper offensive teams depending on the build. But like, again, Heatran and Ursaluna, I'm not sure which one to give the final spot to, but I would say it's a tie, and then one of them gets like the honorable mention in my opinion. But yeah, folks, that's our top 10 again, and hopefully you liked our list, and hopefully we gave you some ideas on what you can use to get things going in Regulation D. A lot of these are staples, right? Where not necessarily the ones on my screen right now, but the Tornaduses, the Dragonites, the FlutterManes. These are all Pokemon that are very splashable on a lot of different teams, and you don't want to have to try and reinvent the wheel. Don't hurt yourself trying to come up with something crazy. right? Just start off with the standard stuff, right? And then from there, after testing and seeing what the meta looks like, if you haven't been doing that already, then you can start getting creative with some of these flexible options. But at the very least, use the Pokemon within the top 10, right? That should be pretty much a majority of your core, right? It may not be, you don't have to use like 6 of the top 10 to make up one team, even though it's very, very possible, but at least have a good core of at least 2, 3, 4 of them, right? Because then from there, the other slots, they can always be interchanged depending on what kind of archetype you want. But at the very least, you got to have the staples. And hopefully, you know, with this top 10, I gave you a list of a lot of those staples, depending on what you want to do with your team. All right. And if the building is something that you need help with and you need a little bit more guidance, feel free to check out coaching on the channel with the tier 3 sub. If you look at the video description below, as well as in the pinned comment in the comment section, there is a link that you can click where you can sign up and join the channel and get a team building session with me. You're able to message me on Discord, and from there we schedule a common time where we can meet for that call and get you that team that you need for the official start of the Regulation D format. All right, so we'll be back with another video, folks. Until next time, peace out. Have a good one.